Hello, welcome to another Purple Insider Extra. Matthew Coller here, along with Sam Ekstrom. A reminder to listen to our longer podcast conversations wherever you get your podcasts. Just type in Purple Insider or use the link below and check out our written work at purpleinsider.substack.com. Sam, question for you. The San Francisco 49ers trade up to the number 3 pick. The whole world is debating who they will take with that pick. But here's my question for you. How does this affect the Minnesota Vikings with the 14th overall pick?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's looking more and more like that top 10 is going to be filled with quarterbacks. Jacksonville, obviously quarterback. Jets, obviously quarterback. 49ers aren't making this move unless they're taking a quarterback. So already 3 QBs are probably going to be off the board. Then you've got 10 picks left before it gets down to the Vikings at number 14. Atlanta could conceivably take one. Matt Ryan's not going to last forever. Cincinnati, they're good. Miami would seem to be good because they're trading that pick with San Francisco, so they're probably set. Maybe Detroit, though. Maybe Carolina. Maybe Denver. The numbers game is not adding up for a quarterback to fall into the Vikings' lap. They would have to trade up to make this happen, and I don't think they have the arsenal for that. So it feels to me like this could be the final straw that eliminates the Vikings from maybe the Trey Lance conversation. And best case scenario, if they want a quarterback, they would have to fall into the number 5 quarterback on the board, which that might be a reach at that stage. So I think this reduces the chance of Minnesota even being in consideration.
Yeah, I think that is probably the biggest takeaway, and just that it moves everybody else down. If we believe some of the Mac Jones hype, you could even be talking 5 quarterbacks. There's so much need for quarterbacks with the teams in the top of this draft that if you think about it, with 14, just do a little quick math here, all of a sudden you can get a top 10 non-quarterback player. And where I think this could be very interesting for the Vikings is if one of the top weapons in the draft ends up falling, because, I think you could see Penei Sewell going high, Rashawn Slater going high. You could see even a defensive end or defensive tackle like Christian Barmore sneaking up into that top 10 if a team really feels like they have a need. And then all of a sudden, you might be looking at a Devontae Smith. You might be looking at a Kyle Pitts, depending on how much people value tight ends and where he's going to go. And then I think the Vikings would have a real conundrum of whether to take a player who could clearly help their offense right away or continue to build their defense, which has been a huge part of the offseason and pretty much where they've invested everything during free agency.
Well, we might be seeing the Vikings, kind of anticipating this too, because they didn't really address edge rusher in free agency, except for Stephen Weatherly, and they didn't address wide receiver. And you look at the, Pro Football Focus's top 20, for instance, there are 4 wide receivers and an elite tight end in Kyle Pitts. And if you go to the top 21, there's 3 edge rushers, not to mention Christian Barmore, who's a pretty good 3 technique candidate. So the Vikings' needs align with, I think, the areas of strength in the top half of this draft. There's going to be an amazing receiver available at 24. I don't think it's an if. I think it's a guarantee. I think there's going to be someone fantastic. Might even be the Minnesota kid, Rashad Bateman. Could be someone like Kwity Paye, who I think if he dropped to 14, that would be great value for the Vikings. It's also possible that there could be enough talent available that they could trade back and still get who they want. It actually plays out pretty well in the Vikings' favor. So I don't love that they've ignored some positions in free agency, but I do think those positions align with probably the options that they're going to have come draft time.
So my question for you is, if the weapon who is there ends up falling, if there is someone who is a top wide receiver, or it's Kyle Pitts, the top tight end at 14, do you think the Vikings would take that player because he's the best prospect on the board, or do you think they would trade back? Because I've been simulating the draft like everybody else using PFF's draft simulator, and it seems like every time I do it, moving back in the first round seems to be the best choice, especially if there's a player that another team that's desperate for weapons, where the Vikings, we'd like to see them get a wide receiver 3 and improve their weapons around Kirk Cousins, but they don't necessarily have to do that in the first round and spend that much because they have Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. So do you think that they would move back in that scenario, knowing how valuable a Kyle Pitts might be for another team that was trying to trade up?
Yeah, I'm team trade back. I just think that acquiring that second round pick would have to be the demand, obviously, and I don't think Rick Spielman should make the trade unless that's what he gets. I think he would though, and I think that there's great value there. Rick Spielman should go to every pro day of the top 5 wide receivers. Should go to the Kyle Pitts pro day. The Vikings should angle like they're taking a receiver. And, if it strikes them on the day, hey, we actually want this guy, I'm not mad about that. That's a great pick that sets you up post Adam Thielen. It pairs somebody with, an already elite top 2 wide receivers. I like that move. It helps Kirk Cousins. It's a good pick. But if you trade back, I like that as well. It's not as sexy, but you might still get a receiver anyway. And I think this is a pretty good receiver draft, even beyond round 1. We saw last year you can find impactful wide receivers on day 2 as well. So I would trade back with, if I'm the Vikings, I reserve the right to take a player if it happens to be like Jalen Waddle or Devontae Smith or someone that you value highly at 14. By all means, take that player.
One thing that I would factor in here is that the Vikings made some win now type of moves in signing Delvin Tomlinson and Patrick Peterson. So maybe in terms of being team trade back, they would want the guy who could help them the most right away, which I think is probably along the offensive line or a weapon. Usually those defensive ends, or at least the ones in this draft, need a little more development to be able to step in right away. But as you mentioned, they have not made a free agent move for a pass rusher yet outside of Stephen Weatherly. So a lot still to be solved during draft time. This has been another Purple Insider Extra. We'll catch you next time.